So this is the lesson for 12-8 day 2. We're solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. The directions today say put your answer into simplest radical form. All right, that is also known on the Regents exam as the exact answer. So the first thing that I need to teach you about is something called triangle reducing. All right, with triangle reducing, it's called triangle reducing because when we go to reduce it, it looks like a triangle, right? To reduce it, all three terms have to be evenly divisible by the same number. So there's actually 6 different examples here that we're going to do. When you go to solve the quadratic formula, you're going to get an answer today that looks like this. However, you need to put it into simplest radical form. When you go to put it into simplest radical form, you're looking at this number, and this number. You are not looking at the number that is inside the square root symbol, all right? So when you go to reduce, you're looking at these 3. So this is why it's called triangle reducing. You're looking for a number that is evenly divisible into the 8, the 4, and the 6. Well, what number goes into 8, 4, and 6? 2. So we would divide all 3 of those numbers by 2 to reduce it into simplest radical form. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. That radical 5 stays there. And the 6 divided by 2 is 3. So in simplest radical form, this original question would change into 4 plus 2 radical 5 over 3. When we take a look at the second one, we have when we're taking a look at the 3 numbers, we're looking at these 3 numbers, 10, 5, and 20. What's the biggest number that goes into 10, 5, and 20? 5. So you're going to divide each of those numbers by 5. We're going to triangle reduce it. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. 5 divided by 5 is 1. That radical 5 stays there. And then you have a 20 divided by 5 is 4. So that reduces to 2 plus 1 radical 5. Technically, you don't need that 1 out in front. It could just be 2 plus radical 5 over 4. In this one, you need to be very, very careful sometimes. It is very tempting, especially on the Regents. They love these type of questions. Remember, look at what we're looking at. We're looking at the number that's in front of the square root symbol. What number is really technically in front of that square root symbol? A 1, all right? There's technically a 1 there. So we're looking at the 5, 1, and 10. What's the biggest number that goes in evenly to 5, 1, and 10? 1. So can we do anything to that? Is dividing by 1 going to do anything? No. This is in simplest radical form already. If you want to write down that this one can't be reduced, it's as far as it can go already. It can't be reduced. If you take a look at this one, we're looking at a 10, an 8, and a 15. What's the biggest number that goes in evenly to 10, 8, and 15? 1 would be the biggest number, all right? Again, we can't do anything to this. This one can't be reduced. It's as far as it can go already. It can't be reduced. Sometimes you're not going to have a plus sign there. Sometimes you'll have a minus sign. It works the same exact way. Again, we're looking at 9, 3, and 6. What's the biggest number that goes into 9, 3, and 6? 3. All right, 3 would be the biggest number, so we're going to divide all of those by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. The minus sign just stays there. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So technically you could put a 1 there or just leave it blank and then the radical 5. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 18, 12, and 24. What's the biggest number that goes into 18, 12, and 24? 6. All right, so we could divide all of those by 6. Triangle reduce it. So 18 divided by 6 is 3. 12 divided by 6 is 2. We keep that radical 2 there, and 24 divided by 6 is 4. So this is called triangle reducing. In order to make your answer into simplest radical form, sometimes you will have to do this. Now, getting into the actual solving of these quadratic formula questions. The very first thing that you're going to have to do in every question is identify your A term, your B term, and your C term. Your A term is the number that's in front of the x squared. Your B term is the number in front of the x. And you have to always look at the symbol that's in front of it. This B term is really a negative 11 because of the minus sign. And then the same thing with the C term. You have to look at the symbol that's in front of the plain number. That C term is a negative 2. Now we're going to use our formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to sub these numbers in. Negative b. First of all, I'm going to draw my line there. Negative b. Now negative 11. All that we're doing is we're sticking in that negative 11 right there. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Our b term is negative 11. Make sure, because you'll screw things up if you don't put parentheses there with your negative number. Remember, negative 11 squared, if you type it into the calculator like this without the parentheses, you'll get the wrong answer because it'll say negative 121 instead of positive 121. So we don't want to type it in without parentheses. Minus 4 times our A term, which is 3, times our C term, which is negative 2. Divided by 2a, 2 times a, so 2 times 3. The first thing that you're going to have to do on your homework today is sub in those numbers. Now, when you go to solve it, we're going to put these into simplest radical form. Negative of negative 11. Because remember, we subbed in a negative 11 for the b, so we have negative of negative 11. That double negative makes it a positive 11, plus or minus. You can type this whole thing right into the calculator. What's underneath the square root symbol, you can type that whole thing right into the calculator all at once. Negative 11 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2. When you do that, you get 145. All over 2 times 3 is 6. Now, you're going to get 2 answers for all of these because of the plus or minus. Just like when we were solving the quadratics before, we then have to split it into 2 because we have the plus and we have the minus. So we have 11 plus the square root of 145 over 6, and we have 11 minus the square root of 145 over 6. These are 2 answers. Now, if we could reduce this, if we could make 145, if we could simplify that radical, we will. We're going to do that later on. We don't have 145 can't be simplified at all. So that's our answer there. But if we could simplify it, we would. Take a look at the next one. Tomorrow we'll be going into more decimals with those. We'll be making those into decimals. Notice that in the first example, we had it as an equals 0. Sometimes you'll see them as, instead of equals 0, you'll have f of x. It works the same exact way. What number is really in front of that x squared? 1. So our A term is a 1. Our B term is a negative 7. And our C term is an 11. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we have x equals negative of negative 7 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Our b term is negative 7, so we have to put it inside parentheses. So negative 7 squared minus 4 times our A term, which is 1, times our C term, which is 11. all over 2 times a, 2 times 1. Continuing on with the solving of it, we have negative of -7. The negative of -7 is positive 7. Plus or minus the square root. You can type this whole thing right into the calculator. -7 inside parentheses squared minus 4 times 1 times 11. When you do that, you get an answer of 5 over 2 times 1, which is 2. We then need to break our answer into 2 different ones. So we have 7 plus radical 5 over 2, and we have 7 minus radical 5 over 2. That can't be simplified anymore. We can't triangle reduce that at all. On the next one, we will. Take a look at the next one. So this time our a term is -2 because that's the number in front of the x squared. Our b term is a -8 and our c term is 1. Negative b, so x equals negative of -8 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is -8 squared, minus 4 times -2 times 1. All over 2 times a, which is 2 times -2. So we're just subbing those numbers in individually. The negative of -8 is positive 8. Plus or minus the square root. You can type this whole thing right into the calculator. -8 squared minus 4 times 2 times 1, you get 72 over -4. Now 72 can be simplified, right? If we take a look at the square root of 72, simplifying radicals, what times what is 72? Well, the biggest perfect square that goes into it would be a 36 times 2. Cross off the 36, bring out the 6. So this simplifies to 6 radical 2. Now, what if you didn't know that that was going to be 36 times 2? What if you were thinking that it was 9 times 8? Well, 9 is a perfect square. You'd cross that out, bring out a 3. So we would have 3 radical 8. Well, 8 can be broken down more, remember. 8 is really 4 times 2. So we could cross off the 4, bring out the 2. You multiply these together when you bring it out. So this would simplify again to 6 radical 2. So going back to our actual problem, we have 8 plus or minus 6 radical 2 over -4. I just changed my radical 72 into 6 radical 2. Now I can triangle reduce. What's the biggest number that goes into 8, 6, and 4? The biggest number that goes into 8, 6, and 4 is 2. So we're going to divide each of those by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 6 divided by 2 is 3. We leave the radical 2, and then -4 divided by 2 is -2. Split it, and I'm out of room. 4 plus 3 radical 2 over -2, and 4 minus 3 radical 2 over 2. Again, tomorrow we'll take it one step farther and we'll make those into decimals. But today we're just leaving it as that. Go ahead and try the next one on your own, please. It says an M. Sometimes they use different letters than X's. Not a big deal. Remember that there is really a 1 in front of that M squared. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. if you can reduce it, which you should be able to, I want you to reduce it. Subbing in the numbers, we have negative b, so we have -4. Notice that there's not a double negative there this time. It's just -4 because we're just subbing in the 4 for the b. Then we have b squared, so we have 4 squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. It's 2 times 1. So -4 plus or minus the square root. We can type that all right into the calculator. 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. When you type it into the calculator, you should get 8 all over 2. 8 can be simplified. Radical 8 can be simplified. Radical 8 is really 4 times 2. Cross off the 4, bring out the 2. So that really turns into 2 radical 2. So we have -4 plus or minus 2 radical 2 over 2. We can triangle reduce it. The biggest number that goes into 2, 2, and -4 is 2. So divide all 3 of those terms by 2. Be very careful. Remember, we always leave that radical alone. So -4 divided by 2 is -2. Plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we're going to split it. All right, when we go to split it, we would have -2 plus 1 radical 2, or just radical 2. You technically don't need that 1 out in front of it, over 1. Technically, in this one, you don't need the over 1 either. All right, and then you would have -2 minus 1 radical 2 over 1. So these would be your 2 answers. Again, there's different ways that you could type them because you technically don't need the 1 in front of the square root symbol. You technically don't need the divided by 1 either because it's a 1. Go ahead and one more. Try this one, please. Last one. Try this one, please. You should be able to triangle reduce this one. Be careful at the very beginning of the problem, you have -b, so you have a negative of -6 plus or minus the square root of -6 inside parentheses squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A, 2 times 1. So negative of -6 is positive 6, plus or minus the square root. When you go to type that into the calculator, you get 48 over 2. 48 can be simplified. Now, most people probably wouldn't think of the actual easiest root to it being 16 times 3. Cross off the 16, bring out the 4. So this simplifies the 4 radical 3. Most people would probably try with 48, maybe by putting in a 4. So maybe 4 times 12, probably. Cross off the 4, bring out the 2. So you have 2 radical 12. 12 can be simplified. 12 is really 4 times 3. Cross off the 4, bring out the 2. No matter which way you do it, you should end up with 4 radical 3. So we have 6 plus or minus 4 radical 3 over 2. We can triangle reduce that. The biggest number that goes into 2, 4, and 6 is 2. So we want to divide each of those by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Split it into 2. So we have 3 plus 2 radical 3 over 1 and 3 minus 2 radical 3 over 1. Again, tomorrow what we'll be doing is taking that one step farther, making them into decimals. It's easier just to do this today with leaving it in simplest radical form.